Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Some Random Thoughts. I'm your host Ryan Mulkowski. On the program today, I have with me my friend Teel Short. Teel, how you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
I'm really glad you're here, and I'm gonna have Teel introduce himself to you all, share where you can find him on social media, and generally things he likes to talk about and what he's passionate about. So Teel, go ahead, share with us a little bit about you and who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. My name is Teel Short. All my social media stuff is under. It's a weird name, so that gives me the benefit of just being able to use my name as my handle.
Yep.
On stuff. But I hang out on Instagram and Clubhouse mostly, that's how I met Ryan, was through Clubhouse stuff, I'm really passionate about two main things that I've been doing on social media is um, intentional community stuff. I live in what is called an intentional community. Basically, it's 180 of us sharing a 10-story building in Chicago, and living, sharing resources, and sharing life together here. So I love to talk about community life and why I live this way, and all that goes with that. And then my other kind of lane has been this deconstructing faith, figuring out what to do when your beliefs change and evolve. Specifically for me, while still remaining in some kind of organized faith like institution in the midst of that, which is very interesting. Those are kind of the two things I love to talk about. And I also like music and movies, and for when those other two conversations get too heavy, I can always talk about bad 90s movies, and indie folk music and like good stuff. So that's
That's good stuff, though. All of that's good stuff. I'm so happy, Teel, that you're on the program. And so Teel is Teel, short, the way it's spelled. Find
yeah.
him on Instagram, on Clubhouse. And yes, we actually did meet. I did meet Teel on the Progressive Christians group on Clubhouse. So if you are on Clubhouse, look up the Progressive Christians group. And what's great about that particular group is that it's not just progressive Christians. As you all know by now, just from me talking, I'm an agnostic atheist, and yet all of the people on the Progressive Christians group have just been wonderful. They're some of the most loving, caring, kind, intelligent people I've ever met. And we're all different. We're all like on very different spectrums, even on progressive Christianity. A lot of us are agnostic. Some of us are atheist. A lot of us are spiritual but not religious. It's a really inclusive, very diverse group of people. And Teel is a moderator of that group, has done a lot of fine work along with Megan Crozier, the Pursuing Life, and many others that you'll be introduced to on my podcast, because these are new friends that I have made over the past several months, and I'm happy to have them on here. So Teel, thank you for all your work and what you do on that Clubhouse group. It's really, in my opinion, and I'm biased, but it's really the best group on Clubhouse. It's my
Well,
favorite. It's the one I'm most engaged with. It's the most
it
fun.
works. It works because people like you show up and participate, and so it's been a surprising part of my life, because I'm generally haven't been very um, a heavy participant in social media stuff, and so it's through the pandemic and everything. It's been a surprising joy. So
And
um,
just to give people a little bit more information, so this Clubhouse group for progressive Christians, they meet weekly. It's every Thursday evening, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Figure out your time zone for all of you that don't live in those two. And then there's an after party, a party that Teel, I would say most of the time, hosts, that happens after the initial group. And that one is really fun because that one's just a free for all. Everyone's just talking, everyone's participating. Doesn't have to be about the particular topic for that week. It's just everybody doing live, sharing life, and hanging out and supporting one another. So anyway, so go check that out if you're on Clubhouse. Teel, so you are helping me with the revisit episode, is what I call it. So we're revisiting all the topics I did in season one. And
Yep.
one of the topics that I did in season 1 that you're helping me with today is on cancel culture and exchange of ideas. Now, let's be very upfront and honest. Most people don't want to talk about this topic because it's a very touchy subject. But I brought Teel on because Teel lives in an intentional community, as he's mentioned in his introduction. I don't know a lot about an intentional community. So, really selfishly, I brought him on because I want to learn more about an intentional community. But what I was thinking was naturally, when you live amongst so many other people, and it's not just a typical neighborhood type relationship that people live in separate homes or separate dwellings. It's not the typical, even living in an apartment or a condo where you're living in the same building, but you're still living life pretty separately and independently. This is a little bit different than that, this community. So naturally, as you all are trying to support one another, care for one another, do community together in a different way, you're going to have moments where you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have people that believe different things, have different values, have different perspectives, and there's going to be a need to have really frank conversation, difficult conversation, but you can't like blow somebody up and then walk away because you're still going to do life with that other person. So I'm just
It'll
really
be,
fascinated
you'll
with this whole
inevitably
thing.
be end up behind them in line for dinner that night. So then it's like, oh, hi again. Yeah, you have to figure it out one way or another.
And this is why exactly I brought you on, because I figured if you can share with us a lot of wisdom of how to do life with people in that kind of setting, I think we can all take away a lot of wisdom of how to be a better human and how to live amongst other humans better with a higher quality of
Right.
human flourishing, whether we live in an intentional community or not. Because we can take, I think, that wisdom everywhere we go, whether it's our neighborhoods, our workplaces, um, religious
Right.
communities or secular communities, what have you. So, Teel, first of all, share with us, the audience, for those of us who don't know, what is an intentional community? And specifically, what is your intentional community?
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I think the kind of the textbook definition of an intentional community is a group of people who have decided to share resources and who have shared resources and shared values, who are living together in some capacity. That's a very wide, it's a very general definition. There's a wide range of the forms that can take. I think that most people, when they think of this concept, they're picturing like kind of like a hippie commune or
Yep.
like um, some kind of like in out in the country around a farm, kind of
Hmm.
like a co-op kind of thing, where there's like people farming together and living out in the country together, selling vegetables by the roadside. So there are other like eco villages. There's also like co-housing models where people do have their kind of their own space, but then they all share maybe one common space as like
Oh,
a,
okay.
a common kitchen or a common living room.
Kind of like hosteling is what I remember.
Yeah.
I've been hosteling a
Yeah.
few times, and it's like you have the common areas, but you have your own separate
Right.
dwelling.
So imagine like living that way permanently or whatever,
Okay.
and like
Okay.
and everybody has some kind of way of participating in that and shared values. But there's so many different models, and so the way that my community is called Jesus People. It's in Chicago, on the north side of Chicago in Uptown, and we're about 180 people, ranging from young single folks to married folks, elderly families with kids, families who are, parents who are empty nesters. Pretty much every walk of life or
Wow.
stage of life is represented here, and we all we live in what was once it's like 100-year-old hotel building. So it's back from like the Al Capone days, like of Chicago. It's like a old school hotel building, and so we bought this building, and we've been this community was founded in 1972.
Okay.
Bought this building in 1989. So we've had this building for a long time, and they basically fixed it up and turned it into basically every hotel room is now a tiny home for
Mm.
each of us. And so I would show you my room right now, but it's just a mess because I just got back from
It's
a
okay.
camping trip.
How
But
big is your
basically,
room approximately?
so imagine a hotel room You know, it is, yeah, it's just like, this is it. It's like, there's my door.
Okay.
My bed is up, a loft bed.
Okay. You got a loft bed. Cool.
And so, and then I have a bathroom over here,
Okay.
and that's it. You know, like I
Okay.
have, uh, so it's kind of like, you know, it's a small hotel room,
Okay.
with a bathroom, and then
Okay.
so I obviously don't have a kitchen or anything. We have a floor kitchen. On every floor there's a kitchen that we share, a common kitchen,
Okay.
and then there's a big industrial kitchen on the first floor and a big cafeteria dining room. So there's a kitchen team that makes meals for the whole house, and then we run 10 different businesses, and nonprofits that, and the ones that are for profit, that we all work, all 100, well, all the adults in the building work in one of those areas. And instead of getting a paycheck, each of us works full time to our ability, and the money that's made at those businesses pays for all of our common needs collectively. So, you know, we have a roofing supply company. That's our biggest business, and we have a coffee shop, a t-shirt printing shop, a musical electronics startup, a skateboard shop, low-income housing units. We run a homeless shelter, that's a few blocks away, and then all of the in-house stuff like maintenance and kitchen team, and so everybody in the house works in one of those areas. And then, you know, the money that's made at the businesses, on the business side of things, pays for our food and our housing, and all of our basic needs, together.
So just to be clear, because I'm still wrapping my mind around this,
Yeah.
no matter how many times I've heard you talk about it. Okay,
Right.
so everyone that lives in the house has to, if they are able to, work, but everybody works in one of those specific things you mentioned.
Correct. Yeah.
So
Everybody
nobody
works.
works in outside of any of the specific companies that you all have formed to produce
Correct.
income.
Everybody works for Jesus people in some capacity.
Okay. Okay. So everyone works for Jesus people. Everybody gets paid for their work, but all of them, right? Does everyone get paid for
Yeah.
their work? But
No, nobody gets paid for their work.
nobody gets paid.
Instead of getting paid, you get free housing, free food, free everything.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
And
So
that's
you all are
paid for.
producing, you are late, you're producing the labor, which produces the income, but all of the profit of all of the businesses get
It's
poured
shared
right back
collective.
into making sure everyone has housing, everyone's fed, everyone has their basic needs like clothing
Right.
and things like that.
Right. And there's no, obviously there's hierarchy in like leadership responsibilities with the businesses and stuff, but there's no hierarchy of, financially. So like
Oh, okay.
the, you know, the person who's like the CEO of whatever business,
Yeah.
and the guy who's washing the dishes, to the person who's, teaching school, to the person who's, casework at the shelter, they're all making the same $0. And so everybody is just kind of, you know, to their ability, helping make it all work, and then we all get everything provided even equally. And so it's, yeah, that's the radical part, like, of our model, right? And there's some communities who, so I know another community in Chicago area that they all have their own jobs, and like normal jobs out in the world in
Okay.
Chicago. But then they give their paycheck into the community. Everything they make goes into the common person.
Gotcha. Okay. I've heard of that model before, but yours is different.
And then that's split up, and then that
Okay.
money is split up to, in the same way, cover everybody.
Right.
So it ends up being similar vibe, but it's a different model, right?
Yeah.
And some communities, it's more of like, you keep your, like, you have your own job and you make your own money, and you just pay like you basically pay rent, like you pay like a
Mm,
certain amount, like almost being a part of a golf club or something. Like you pay a membership, like, and that money pays for whatever areas that are shared. So there's so many different ways to structure it. And this is just the, what we've done. and
yeah.
and the, so that's kind of the brass tacks, or what, like the logistical way that this is set up. But the heart of it is that, the point of it is that we want to really, know each other and live communally. And it's just hard to, we just found that it's hard to do that in the world, in the kind of individualistic, capitalistic world. It's like you kind of have to put most of your energy and effort into just providing for yourself
Yep.
and for your family, if you have a family.
Yep.
And then in the family unit really becomes the community. Like
Yeah.
your own family is your that's who you're spending your time with.
Yep.
um and there's it's in anything, any relationships outside of that, you really have to squeeze in.
Mm-hmm.
Because just to get, if you got kids, and if you're married with kids, then just getting your kids to school and to activities and taking care of everything and working enough to pay for all that, and like that takes up 90% of most people's time. And then like if they have any time left over, they can hang out with friends. And then you can get creative, right? You make share childcare with another family that you're friends with, and then you have that bond. And that is, in a sense, a little part, like a little way of living communally if you share childcare with another family, because then
Mm.
you have that overlap, right? And we've just chosen to like, let's have a really intense overlap that's built into the structure of our lives, so that we really get this. Another overlap is like, hey, if you go to church with other people that you are friends with, then like you get that overlap on Sundays, right? And I think we've just, for us, it's like that's not enough. Like we want a bigger overlap than just one day a week, and we need to. So some people see it as like this radical, like, wow. I kind of see it as like almost like I'm I feel like the less you share with people, the more intentional you have to be to build relationships and friendships.
Yep.
And so I almost feel like my decision to move here is like I'm too lazy or unintentional to like to build those relationships. So I'm gonna like move into a structure that kind of forces me to like to do that.
Yeah,
If
to
where it's
motivate you to do that because it's built. It's an organic
yeah,
response of the system. Yeah.
it's all that's built into the structure of it, that I'm going to see all my neighbors and friends at dinner every night. I'm going to see them in the shared kitchen because I don't have my own kitchen, so I have to. It forces that. And I realize forces is a
Right.
strong word, but oh, siren, sorry. um
It's all good.
but no, it just, it's that like, oh, kind of like when on a Sunday, I'm going to keep using the church example, but like on a Sunday morning, like, oh, I don't really feel like going to church. But then you get there and you're kind of like happy you went because you saw your friends and you saw
Mm-hmm.
people. And it's that similar thing, but it's like every time I walk out my door, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to like go down and like, I'm just not in the mood to run into somebody. And then, but you know what? It more often than not, it's like, oh, I'm glad it's better. It's not good to be alone. Like it's good to be. So that's kind of the heart is like, like we grow when we have conflict with people, and when we um, have relationships. That's how we grow and are fed. And so I think this way of life just like is a structure for more interaction, sometimes more conflict and more growth. And that's kind of why we're doing it, and we're able to do a lot more together than we could do separately. Like I would have no idea how to run a homeless shelter and and do all the things that we do, but like collectively we're able to make our resources go a lot farther and do a lot of pretty cool stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's why we're here in a nutshell.
What made you decide to live in an intentional community? How did that even start for you? How did you even find out about it and how did you get in it? All that.
Yeah, I would have never known that of the concept until, so I grew up in a small town in Kansas, moved to Chicago to go to college,
Mm.
and um, I always liked church because of the community aspect of it. I was never really much of a spiritual person. I
Mm.
never really had like a big God experience. I just liked people and liked hanging out, and so that was kind of my whole church experience. Is like, oh, I like people, and these people are kind. Like
Okay.
I
Yeah.
feel valued and accepted here. This is a place where the values are around how we treat each other rather than like how good at basketball you are, how good at school you are. And so I felt like I thrived in that
Mm.
setting. So I loved youth group, and I that's why I love church. And I think when I went to college too, I loved college because I just loved the togetherness of it, the camaraderie of it,
Mm-hmm.
and the community life. I mean, college is intentional community. So if you're going to an on-campus university, like
Right.
you are living in intentional community because you are it's a transient intentional community, right? It has a limit to it. You're there
Yep.
for a certain amount of years.
Yep.
um, and it's all kind of formulaic, where it's like it's kind of spoon fed to you. And it's very structured, and it's set up for you, but it is intentional community in a lot of ways because you're living together in the dorms or in the housing, you're eating your meals together, you're you have common work because you're all in
Yep.
class together, you're spending all your time together pretty much, and you're all there kind of for the same reasons roughly. And you have to deal with conflict, you have to like you're that so I just love that. So I fell in love with not the academic side of college in the same way I didn't fall in love with the spiritual aspect of church, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
um so it's like I like church not for the spiritual stuff but for the community.
Community. Yep.
I liked college for not for the academic side, though I learned a couple things,
Oh,
but
that's good.
for the community. And then I worked at a Bible camp in the summers. I learned that as a camp counselor, and I learned that I actually didn't like kids as much as I thought I did. Like I didn't have much of a patience or threshold for it,
Mm-hmm.
but I loved camp. Again, not because we were working with kids, but because of the camaraderie of it, of staff and like the friends I made there.
Yeah.
And I believed in what we were doing. I was like, this is a good thing for kids. I learned that I'm not that great at it. But because it was a hard experience, like, and we got through it together. So I just, through all those experiences, um, I was falling in love with this idea of community life. And then it's just funny because we always talk about those days as being like the glory days, like, oh yeah, back in college,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
or back in youth group or back in at summer camp. But then like as soon as you graduate and you turn 23 or whatever, then it's like those days are done.
Mm-hmm.
Get a job, get a family in your own house and your own get your career going, and like settle down, and like no more community life for you. And that's like we've accepted that as the norm. And I just thought like I don't see this as like a phase, and I don't see a reason to stop living communally. I actually believe in this way of life. I think it's good for me. And so I was looking for ways to do that, and I was discovering that people actually do that. Like that. That's what intentional communities are, and in all their various forms. And so I had gotten to know a couple of communities in Chicago and checked them out. And one was Riva Place Fellowship, and one was Jesus People. And I did an internship here, and I just really enjoyed it. And I just felt like, wow, these people are doing it. And so, yeah, I jumped in. It's been almost 6 years now that I've been here at Jesus People.
Wow. Okay. So tell me, I guess, going back into our discussion on exchange of ideas and the whole general idea of like cancel culture. So first of all, it seems like cancel culture happens because people don't really live in an intentional community. And I think it also happens on social media because I think we forget that there's humans behind the profile. I think it's like easy to attack
Yep,
something when you don't have to do life with that person
totally.
and you don't even have to see that person, as a human. You
Yep.
are in a very different situation to where you're having to do life with people intentionally.
Yep.
And so tell me, how do you handle disagreements? So let's say it's with other residents. I don't know what you call them. I don't want to use the incorrect term. Is it resident? Like
I think
people? Like
we say, well, in house we say um, other Jesus people, like
other
other J.
Jesus people? Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
we'll
like other members, like members.
members. Okay, so yeah, so let's use members then. So name some times, and you don't have to be super specific, but just as much as you want to. Name some times where you've really had to like wrestle intensely and intentionally with maybe disagreements with other members? Because, okay, so let's back it up a little bit. So it's called Jesus People. So I'm assuming this is a religious organization, Christian
Yep.
organization,
Yeah, it's a Christian community and church.
Christian community in a church. Are there like religious requirements that you have to meet in order to be in the community, or?
Mhm. No, it's pretty no, it's pretty chill in that
Okay.
respect. As long as people come in respecting that we are um, a Christian organization and there are some like we do Jesus stuff here. There's no requirements of like you have to come to this chapel service or you have to
Okay.
like sign this statement of faith or something. There's people here that I would say it's predominantly Christians and but there's a handful of atheists, agnostics, and wonders and all the
I like
in
that,
between.
wanderers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that just gives us a good foundation of kind of what the community looks like that you live in. So, yeah, tell me about. So let's go back to the question. So tell me about moments where you've had some
Yeah.
disagreements, some contention,
It's a
whatever you want to call it.
really good question. Yeah, and I think that it's pretty fascinating. You know, it's harder to yeah you can't cancel somebody when they're when you if you the better you know them like personally the harder it is to cancel them, right?
Hmm.
So it's easy for us to cancel a celebrity or somebody because we don't have any relationship with them,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
um and whatever cancel means, but yeah, and in the same respect, I often think I compare us to other churches are that are often churches are kind of bound by their main unifying principle is that they
Hmm.
all believe the same thing.
Yep.
Because mostly the time they're spending together is Sunday mornings to teach about the Bible or
Hmm.
whatever religion,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what is bonding everybody. In a lot of models of church, I won't say every church, but when you're living together and you're eating together, sharing a building, working together, doing all of it together. You have a lot more different bonding agents, if that makes sense. And so you're not just bound by belief system. You're it's a little bit more like family. You're it's like a big extended family, and you get to know each other. You watch kids grow up down the hall from you. You babysit for that friend. You uh, go on vacation with this family, and like you celebrate birthdays. You go through tragedies together, and I mean it's intense, right? And you build these strong
Mm,
relationships that
yeah.
are very grounded in real life. So I often compare it to family. It's like, well, if you're in a family and and your uncle Bobby is like the kind of one that's always like getting in trouble and in and out of jail a few times and has a drinking problem or whatever.
Hmm.
Generally, you don't cancel Uncle Bobby. Like you still love him and you still invite him. You don't say like, well, he's not allowed to come to family reunions anymore.
Mm,
I mean, there are boundaries. It's like, well, if he's hurting other family members, then he
right.
can't come anymore. But if
Yep.
he's just that, like, well, he gets into trouble, but we still love him and we still keep praying for him and hoping that he comes around. And or you might set boundaries like we're not bailing Bobby out anymore. Like it's been too many times, but you're not going to cancel him usually,
Mm,
right? And
gotcha. Yeah.
whereas if it's just a friend for your friend Bobby, who you kind of know from high school, but you don't really see him anymore, then you might cancel Bobby because you're like, well, like that's more trouble than it's worth, kind of, you know. So I'm just saying, like, um, that's more like what the vibe is here. It's like we can't really cancel each other because we're family, you know. And so when it comes to differing viewpoints on things, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like we've gotten used to that, we've figured out how to coexist together, um, despite a lot of different views. I mean, there's people here that we're all over the map when it comes to theology
Mm,
and politics. We're in this in Chicago, so there's a leaning, probably some political leanings, but there's a lot of diversity within that still, and
okay.
and so yeah, I think that, we learn how to, just like you learn at family reunion, like, well, we're not going to talk about this topic at the dinner table because we know where that goes. But if I want to talk about that, I could talk to, you know aunt Susie, like, personally on the side, and be like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Because, but like, you might not like just bring it up, because that it's not going to go well if you bring it up in this way. And so it's kind of similar. It's like, well, everybody, and what they believe about things. You've learned that you're not going to change each other's minds,
Mm,
really, like, but it is can be helpful to discuss it, and sometimes your beliefs affect other people, and in those cases, then we really do have to talk about it. You know what I mean? And like, and so, it's kind of an interesting journey. I think that we're still figuring out. We're always trying to evolve and figure out how to discuss things better, and
yeah.
have those hard conversations. But you do have to have that conversation. The alternative is that there's this kind of like awkwardness that we're
Yep.
and funkiness that you're building around, or like
Mm-hmm.
tiptoeing around. And so, it's pretty important. We often say, my motto for myself is like, let's have the conversation. Like, just got to have the conversation. We can't like just tiptoe around this. Like, let's be real. You believe this, I believe this. This is how that is creating a conflict, and let's just talk it out. Yeah, I would say that we don't have the luxury of canceling people, um, and so we have to figure out some kind of third way or gray area to live in here, which
Yeah.
it's just a big reason why I'm here, because and why I want to live in community, because I'm much more interested in the gray area than the black and white, which is kind of what the world is, just becoming more and more black and white,
Right.
and kind of, divided,
Yep.
um, and because it's hard to have those conversations, and but I think it's worth it if you can lean into that, and we're not perfect at it here, but we definitely are set up to be able to have opportunities to have the conversation more often than the average group of people.
So, okay, so yeah, let's explore that a little bit more. So, one of the points you bring up is we can't really engage in cancel culture because we're family here, and you treat your family inherently different than you treat a friend or an acquaintance. It seems like the closer the relationship, the more intimate the bond, the less likely you'll be able to just say, just to write somebody off, or just to completely disconnect from that person. So that's one aspect. So now let's move a little bit into that. So because everyone is family in your intentional community, there's a familial bond or relationships that have been formed. You saying we can't really be conflict avoidant, because conflict avoidant will just create more conflict in the end. It'll just produce, like you said, an awkwardness. It might produce resentment. It would produce a toxicity that's not good for people to live
Yeah.
amongst each other. So you can't be conflict avoidant. At the same time, you can't just be overly aggressive or passive
Yeah.
aggressive to the point where you're just writing people off left and right, and you're just trying to cancel relationships left and right, because that doesn't foment a healthy familial environment. So, like you said, there's a third way that you guys are trying to figure out. So, what is what have you all done generally, or what skills have you picked up when it comes to like that emotional, like, learning of how can I be in relationship with people that I inherently disagree with on religious lines, political lines, relational lines, what have you, whatever the social thing is. What are some things that you've had to learn and develop to emotionally and relationally to be a better human in a community?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, just there are a lot of tools and skills when it comes to engaging in conflict, and kind of like the nonviolent communication stuff, and like, the basics of it, just like using I statements. And so
Mm,
much of it is just kind of maturity and wisdom that we're all trying to grow in as individuals. And what happens in conflict is we're often reduced to kind of our base level,
mm,
like all of our insecurities and all of the deep stuff in us, like flies right up to the surface
Yeah.
as soon as we're kind of on, if we feel like we're on our heels, like we're um, getting defensive, and or if somebody calls something out in you, immediately it feels like it brings all that stuff up onto the table where like everything is in question now. Like, am I a good person?
Mm,
And am I lazy? Am I unkind? Am I whatever? Like all of the things that you're insecure about all of a sudden feel like they're on display, and you can either choose to defend, like be defensive and aggressive to like, because you can't take that amount of vulnerability, or you can kind of learn how to. So a lot of it goes back to how much have we all accepted ourselves, and how
mm,
well are we living with ourselves, and in that internal work. So it feels kind of like training. It's like we're all training for um, let's say we're all training for a marathon, and we're just kind of, we don't know when the marathon's going to happen though. It's like an impromptu marathon, and so we're all training just in case it comes up that we need to run a long distance. And so if and for us it's that, like, for me it's like going to therapy, it's talking out things with my close friends, and like processing like my insecurities. And for other people it's like meditating and prayer and
yeah.
discipleship. And there's so many different ways that we can reading books about whatever we're trying to figure out, and all
Yeah.
that self work. And if you've been doing that training, and then you can test that training out in many ways, in miniature ways, like through your day. Like, oh, I'm angry about this because this person just did that. I'm gonna talk to them about that, and I'm gonna like, and just like you can like hone those
Yeah.
skills and that
Right.
ability to hold those kinds of things. But then when all of a sudden it's time to like, oh, a big conflict hits you, somebody calls you out for something, or you have to have a hard meeting with somebody and something comes up, all of a sudden that work is tested.
Right.
And if you've been doing the work, then you're able to like kind of use all of that, and you have some kind of threshold for it. But if you haven't, or if you're just having a rough week, then like so much of it connects back to that internal work that everybody has to do for themselves. And then like this like recognition, like that not everybody has the privilege or is in the space to do that kind of work. We're all different, right? So if somebody's like, it's easier for me to do internal work practically than single mom of two kids.
Mm,
Like, she's just trying to get by, right?
yeah.
Um, and so if she has any time left over during nap time to do some internal work, that's great. But like, so like, am I gonna have a little bit more patience for her when we have a conflict, knowing like, oh, or this person who's like, I know that their mom is sick, and they're going through this and that. And again, because we're in community together, we know those things about each other, ideally, right? We know what each other are going through. So on a good day, I can have an extra dose of grace or patience with somebody, and give them the benefit of the doubt. So it takes a lot of that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no, I think it does, in respect to that we need to acquire tools. And so a lot of that is self work. And at the same time, you've hinted at, which I think is important, that there's privilege involved on who's able to achieve, or in the psychology world, it's called self actualize, who's able
yeah,
to self actualize more than others. And there's a lot of disparities and inequalities and inequities in that particular work. So it's
yeah,
important that, I think, like you mentioned, and you gave a wonderful example of, if I'm more privileged and I've been able to do the work more because of my privilege and because of my situation,
yeah,
if there's a single mom who's just really struggling, and like you said, it's really hard for that person to do any kind of self-care or inner work, just because being a single mom with two kids is incredibly difficult, then I need to use my privilege to be more patient with that person if I run into a conflict with that person, instead of just continuing to exacerbate the conflict, right? Like use your position, whatever position you're in, not to make yourself better than another person, but to use your betterness to actually help contribute to that person's
Right.
well-being more, and to help them. So I think that's a really wonderful pearl of wisdom you've shared, Teal. And you being in an intentional community, it's even much more. And you've reminded me of an example recently. I had a coworker who was doing really well with getting a lot of their administrative stuff done, and they have to do certain administrative tasks in order for my job to
Mm.
function well. And I noticed the last couple weeks or so that this person who usually was very consistent in getting their stuff done properly and done on time, all of a sudden wasn't getting their stuff done, or it was getting done late, or it was done incorrectly. And it started to frustrate me a little bit because I'm like, what is going on? Why is this person not doing this? This is very uncharacteristic. And I have to ashamedly say that I wasn't in the particular space where I should have given more patience. I was just in a state of frustration. So I contacted the person, and I contacted the person through email just because it's more efficient for me just to send out all my email reports and everything to everybody. This person calls me, and this person is just, I can tell, is very tired and very
Yep.
frustrated and exhausted.
Yep.
And so even though I can't say I did a really good job at the beginning with being patient and more gracious to the person, because I was just
Right.
frustrated that this person wasn't getting their stuff done. During the conversation, they were saying all of the stressors they were going through. And I could have been a jerk and just said, those are excuses. I don't care about your excuses. You need to get your work done. But instead of me doing that, I will say, okay, so I did do one right thing. The thing is, I said, wow, I'm really sorry to hear about everything you're going through. Do you mind telling me a little bit more and how I could be more supportive of you during this difficult time? And that immediately flipped the conversation. And just me share, and that's not like anything I need to be proud of. I mean, that's just me being a basic decent human being extending grace to somebody who needs it. That doesn't make me a hero. It just makes me
Right.
somebody who was willing to take a moment to get out of himself and to have empathy for the other person. And I think a lot of times that's the thing that we're lacking, is we're
Yep.
lacking the space to be empathetic, and we're lacking the space to be able to really be supportive of other people. And I think a lot of that is also because we've dealt with a lot of collective trauma and a collective grief
Yeah.
because of COVID-19 and because of a lot of other difficult situations. The
Yep.
election cycle came at the same time as COVID-19, came at the same time as all the economic uncertainty that happened because of COVID and because of other things. Um, we had witnessed an immense amount of death, immense amount of suffering.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me a little bit about the stressors that an intentional community faces collectively and individually, especially during COVID-19, especially during maybe the election cycle and all of the social, economic, racial, all of the other things that just get fomented and exacerbated and really stressed out to the max because of what happens. How did you all navigate those things? Because I can imagine being just in a family unit, a traditional family unit, it was hard enough to navigate. How do you navigate that when you're with like 180 some odd other people living
Yeah.
together?
Well, we did go into lockdown essentially, so that we were like I wasn't seeing people really during the the heaviest part of of the pandemic. So
Yeah.
I was in this room pretty much. Like we would go. The kitchen was preparing the meals in like to go boxes,
Mm,
and we would go down in shifts by floor with masks and wash our hands and grab a box and come right back up to our rooms and eat by
wow.
ourselves. So each for family units, they were eating. They could obviously be together and
Yeah.
in their rooms, but yeah, for single folks like myself, I was just in my room eating by myself. Like and that and and you can go for walks and stuff, but like yeah, we weren't seeing each other, and it all of a sudden it made our home feel more like a normal apartment where you don't really talk to
Mm,
your neighbors.
mhm.
And so easier I think than the alternative of just like you don't live in a community and you just don't get to see anybody. like we'd at least get to see each other in the hallways here and there, and so there's and just the feeling of there are people around, and we were doing everything over Zoom and stuff. So I don't know. It wasn't like we were all stuck in a house together. We were kind of just like we weren't seeing each other that much. I can't
Okay.
speak. I'm sure for the families in the house, there's anyways. Everybody had to deal with it. But I guess what I'm saying is it probably wasn't in some ways wasn't that different than for anybody else.
Okay.
And I would say if anything, there was a benefit to having being able to take care of each other because when somebody would have to quarantine, then we could all help out. Like we kind of had a structure and a system of like, okay, this person showing symptoms, they're going to quarantine, stay in their room. Who's going to bring meals outside their door, and who's going to do this, and and so we're able to take care of each other in that way. I think we were really worried just because of the way we live that
Yeah.
COVID was going to rip through our
Right.
house. But really we did pretty well, and
Okay,
we had
good.
a few kind of upticks of like, oh, we have this person has COVID, and because they got COVID, this person got COVID because they work with
Mm,
them. But we were able to always keep it within like one or two levels of contact tracing, and
okay. That's good.
never got out of hand. And so, and yeah, we really made it through really well. So,
Good.
but anyways, yeah, but the effect, the like mental health effect
Right.
or
Yep.
impacts of COVID and the shutdown and everything, it's the same as anybody else. It's just we're seeing it in each other's lives more closely.
Yep.
So you just see like, oh, this person's gonna it's gonna take them a while to
Yep.
come back from this. People who might have already have like paranoia, or just like have some anxiety around
Yep.
a lot of the stuff. It's just heightened, right? And so, so yeah, I think I'm just see it more closely, and in my neighbors here, and in myself, and we're all, but we're able to process it together. And now, like most of us are vaccinated, and we're kind of in the light at the end of the tunnel kind of space, and able a lot of stuff is reopened here, and but yeah, we're still kind of doing the aftermath kind of work, and processing what it looks like to get back to things again, and how we're all affected still. And I, something about it was like I was on the COVID response team that we've made, put together when all this started, and it sucks to be the COVID cop, kind of, like have to like enforce mask wearing
Yeah.
and this and that. And so for me personally, I feel that of like, man, we made it through, but at what cost? Like,
Mm,
and most people, like, we did pretty well, but like, how like how so many healthcare workers have quit their jobs and stuff.
right. Yep.
It's kind of a much smaller scale because basically COVID was really hard, and there's nobody to blame for it, really. There's no person to be mad at
Yeah.
for the pandemic.
Yeah.
So then people would take it out on healthcare workers,
Yep.
right? Who are
Yep.
like making them wear masks or making them
Mm-hmm.
do this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I felt like a small like hint of that. It's just like I did not start the pandemic. I'm just on the team that's trying to figure out how to come up with policies to keep us
Yeah.
safe. So like I'm not the bad guy here, but I again, just like you have shared in your story, like I'm trying to have that extra dose of understanding, like, and that's just kind of a part of being of leadership, right? If you step up
Yeah.
into leadership into anything, you have to take the brunt of some of that, human, like, humanity. And so I think I'm still recovering a little bit from that, and I might need to have some conversations with some people like, hey, this was hard. I did not like how you talked to
Mm-hmm.
me
Mm-hmm.
about mask wearing 8 months ago,
Yeah.
and I was able to let it go because I was just trying to get through. But I just want you to know that I'm still thinking of that, and I like want an apology, or I want to talk about that, or whatever it is. Like that might be something,
Yep.
and it's one of those things where you just have to decide is like, am I still holding on to that? Because if I am, then I should talk to them about it, or
Correct.
forgive
Yep.
them for it, or like I need
Yep.
something better than this, and
Yep.
or it might be something that I can just like let go, and it'll be okay. But yeah, there's some of that, and I think we all have to ask ourselves those questions, and so it's been a wild ride, man.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, having to have those conversations are incredibly complex. They can be difficult, but they're worth it because a lot of your mental health is based on how can you reconcile relationships, right?
Yeah.
Especially those people who you care about. You genuinely do care about this person as a human, and not just as a human, but like this is a person you do life with. And so when this person hurts you, it really hurts. And so do you continue to carry the hurt, which will affect your mental health and your emotional well-being, or do you find a way to reconcile that hurt so that way you can move forward in the relationship with the person, find some healing? That's all really good wisdom. I want to leave with you. We're going to wrap up our time, so I want to leave you with the last word. I leave all of my guests with the last word. So what is just some encouragement, some love, some advice that you just want to share with the audience? Just what has made you a better person, and how can we be better? It's an open-ended question, just so whatever pops into your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's this, I don't know where this like parable or story came from. It was shared with me, um, and I'll probably butcher the telling of it, but there's like the story of like a gate to a village, back in old times, um, and there's this guy that works at the gate, and he's just like the gatekeeper of this village. And this family comes, and they're on horseback and wagons, and they've finally arrived at this journey of moving into this village. The guy's like, "Hey, welcome," and they're like, "Oh, we're so glad to be here. You know, we it's been a long journey. We were really sad to move from our other village, and it's been a hard thing that we left behind a lot of really good people in our old life, really amazing friends and family, and we're kind of heartbroken, but we finally made it here and left all those wonderful people behind." And the gatekeeper's like, "Well, don't worry, there's a lot of wonderful, great people in this village, just like you're describing, patient people and loving people. And so you'll find those people here." And they came in. And then a couple days later, another family came. Same, they'd come from a long ways away, a long journey from another town. And they're like, and he's like, "Welcome." And they're like, "Oh man, we've been on a long journey. We're so glad to be here. We came from this last place we lived was just this terrible place. Everybody was just so bitter, and we were constantly having conflict with people, and they were not kind people. They were very unkind." And the guy was like, "Well, you're gonna find those people here too, but
Mm,
welcome in. Like, we have those people here too." And so, it's kind of just that grass is always greener. Your problems are going to follow you everywhere, kind of like wisdom. So it's nothing new, but I think I just, as a guy who's, you know, deconstructing a lot of my Christian faith and figuring out what
yeah.
I believe anymore, and um, I've really just I've kind of thrown my lot in with these folks here, and I really love them, and
Mm,
I don't, and we believe such different things.
mm,
But the truth is, and there's a lot of conflict and hardship that comes with that for me, as somebody who like is very open and affirming of
hmm.
LGBTQ folks,
Right.
and and that's a journey that my community is still in the early stages of.
Okay.
And so that's one area where that's really hard for me, because I'm like, "Oh, we got to do something better than what we're doing now." And but I just keep thinking about, like, there's going to be, whoever I throw my lot in with, there's going to be issues and problems, and there's going to be conflict. And I think I'm just, after living in community for 6 years, I'm very sobered up to that reality,
Mm,
that wherever I go, that I know that I want to live in community. And so wherever I go, um, there's going to be conflict and problems and disagreements, and I could find a more progressive space, or like a a bunch of people that are all deconstructed Christians that
hmm.
believe all the same things as I do,
Hmm.
theologically or politically. But are they going to want to live in community with me in this radical way?
Mm,
Are they going to be willing to sit through conflict? Do they even have the ability to do that? Like, these people here, to all their faults, they know how to live together. They've been doing it for almost 50 years.
wow.
And so,
Wow.
so it's just like, I'm gonna have issues wherever I go, and it's just kind of pick your poison. And that's a negative way to look at it. But it's also pick your, pick your poison, but pick your joy, choose your people, because they're going to be beautiful wherever you choose. There's going to be beautiful, wonderful people that are worth loving and worth having conflict with. And there's going to be people that you just cannot get along with, and it's really hard. And there's disagreement that it feels like so impossible to get over. And it's just like, you got to pick. And I've chosen, and not that I can't make it change that choice, but like, I just would rather choose and dig in all the way, go deep, and not have resentment, because and have this like, well, if I this feeling of like, you people are all like, you're the problem, whereas like, because I will have that with anywhere I go.
Yeah.
So just like really choose to love these people and to be humble and know that I'm that person for some people here that like they can't get along with. I'm part of it, and just I'm choosing to go deep. So that's my, I guess, like wisdom that I'm trying to live into, that I would offer to anybody, is like, make your choice of who you want to do life with and go deep. Again, it's going to be really hard no matter what, but it's better to go deep and give it a solid shot than kind of bounce around between different villages and
Mm.
different friends and different families, and constantly having a reason to go to the greener grass on the other side, and resent where you're at. But
Mm.
just to choose and to go all in, and at least at the end you can say you went deep, and you gave this life a solid shot of loving the people around you, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do here.
Well,
Yeah.
that's really beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that, Teal. I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can all take away from that moment. But we just want to thank you, Teal, so much for all that you've shared. I've learned so much in this conversation. I've been deeply humbled by it, and just want to thank you for taking the time to join us.
Well, it's an honor. I'm always so happy when you're in the Clubhouse space, and so it's an
Thank
honor
you.
to see your face. We don't often get to see each other's faces,
Right.
so that's nice, and it's good to be in this space with you. And I hope that we can continue to hang out in
Yeah.
that world. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. And I'll definitely have you back on in the future. And just thank you so much for taking the time. And for all of you watching, listening, thank you so much for your support. Hopefully this has been a really wonderful discussion, has really helped you and maybe just made you a little bit better today. But as we go, I just want to say you have one life, make the most of it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. You all take care.